For those of you wondering what we were going to do with all that lard from the last video, this is really easy, but I'll show you how I do it. We're going to render that down, turn it into some fat that we'll have in quart jars at the end. It should turn out pearly white for us. You can use that for, like I said, pies. I like to deep fry it and it's delicious. So all I did was I like to do like 20 pounds of this at a time just to save time. But I grabbed pretty much every pan in my house and filled them up with lard. I put a 1/4 cup of water in the bottom of each pan just to make sure it doesn't burn. And then set them in there in the oven at 190 degrees. And it shouldn't burn at 190 anyways. And we'll check on them in a second. Okay guys, so we've got our lard is just beginning to sweat out or render down. And some of the bigger pans are taking a little bit longer. But this one down here, grab a towel so you can see. This one down here, those bits are just starting to turn brown, those solid bits. I would call that done, and you can see that you got this clear fluid next to it. That's what you kind of want to keep. So we're going to take this out, we're going to strain it, and I'll show you what it's like to put it into jars. Alright, so basically we're taking it and we're running it through a real fine strainer. Normally I'd use cheesecloth, but they were all out at the store, so this really fine strainer should work. We're just going to run all our lard through there. Leave all these bits on top. Some people like to take these bits later on and they'll crisp them up. They'll use them for salad topping. I don't myself, but mix it in with eggs, whatever. Get them all down in there. Put that down. And if you want to get a shot of this, it's going to be kind of a greenish yellowish color when you first render it down, and then later on when we put it in jars and we cool it off, it's going to end up pearly white. We'll let this sit for a little bit. We'll get the rest of our pans done, and then I like to let it settle. The bottom about inch of the pan usually has a little bit of sediment in it, so I'll try to scoop off of the top to fill the jars and leave that bottom inch in there just because I'm a little picky. We'll see how that looks a little later. Basically a full pot of lard here, if you can see that. It's just, we've got all of our pans done. Let it settle for about an hour. And now we're just going to start skimming that pure lard right off the top. And if you're a smart person, you go ahead and buy a ladle and a funnel for your jars. I'm doing this at home. I don't have that, so we'll deal with what we got. But if you can, they make funnels to put this stuff into jars. Makes it a lot easier. I'm going to wipe it down with paper towels because been working about 70 hours a week and didn't have time to pick one up. Show you one jar, don't want you to get bored, and then I'll show you just a little later when we got her cooled off how it actually looks when it's finished. So I don't have that funnel, so I'm just going to wipe down the edges of the jar. I grab a lid over here from the bag of lids. Put one on there, and I don't can it. Some people actually take the time to pressure wash the jars, and then they'll fill it up with the lard, and then they'll do what's called either a hot water bath or another pressure cooker cycle to actually can this, and that'll make it shelf stable for probably a couple years. But just doing it like this, if you keep it in the fridge, it will pretty much stay good forever. If you decide that you need to put it somewhere else, if you don't have enough room for all of it, it'll stay in the cupboard for about 6 months before it actually starts to do anything. The biggest issue with making lard, especially in this quantity, is you want to get it cooled fast enough. So I've let this sit for a couple hours on the counter, and then I'm going to take and put it into the fridge right away. As soon as I've got it jarred up, I'm going to put it in there. If you've got an ice paddle or even a plastic bag full of ice that you can put in there and just kind of stir around, that's going to be a lot better, but we're doing it at home. This is for me. So we're just going to throw that right in the fridge, and as soon as it's cooled off, we'll show you what the end product looked like. All right, we got all our jars ready. Basically just ladled it all in there. Right now you couldn't buy quart jars, and usually I give a lot of it away, so those quart jars that I've bought haven't made their way back. So we just got pint jars, and actually I left the lid off of all of them just to make sure that they cool fast enough. I have had batches in the past that get a little mold in the bottom of them because you've got so many of them in there, and the fridge only has so much strength to take heat out. So you want to try to space them out. If you're doing it like a sane person, you're probably only doing like 5 pounds at a time, and you don't need to worry about that. But there's all our finished lard here. We're just getting towards the end of the pot, and I'll let Lynn take this here. So we're just getting towards the bottom, and this is where I said there was going to be some sediment that kind of builds up. And I move real careful, try not to stir it up. But you see how it gets a little foggy at the bottom as opposed to how clear the rest of this is? This is really good pork. Normally when I take stuff home, you're gonna find actual stuff in the bottom. This really doesn't have much of it other than just a little bit of a yellow cloudy. You can kind of see that in the pot. It's just kind of yellow cloudy. So we're going to finish up this jar, and I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of the rest of that and try to keep my lard the best that it possibly can. So at that point, you put the stuff in the fridge, make sure it's, you know, spaced out, make sure you leave the lids off of it or stir it with some ice or something like that. If you're in Minnesota and it's 20 degrees outside, take your whole pot, set it out on the balcony, and just let her sit for a couple minutes before you start the jarring process. Either way, it'll turn out okay for you, and I'll show you just how white these turn out when we finally get down to it. Alright, here we got our end product. We got about 16 jars of fresh lard. As you can see, pearly white. You can look at the bottoms of them. Sometimes you'll get a little sediment in the bottom if you're trying to stretch it too far. These are pearly white bottom, pearly white top. Absolutely beautiful. These are ready for making pies, ready for deep frying in. We already got into this one, and I already gave a couple of them to the neighbors. So that's how to make lard. Here you go.